You were just telling me about you guys expanding your business by taking the back unused space of your building and starting up a new product line. Talk to me about the origins of that and using some extra unused space and finding good use for it.
Yeah, so we own an ice distributor. It's a really special and complicated story where we buy ice from manufacturers and resell it to people. So it's a pretty straightforward business. You would think there'd be absolutely no money in it, but I was surprised when I originally saw the financials of the gentleman that we bought it from. Ever since we bought it, we've been trying to figure out good ways to grow it. We sell regular packaged ice and dry ice, and both of those have their own market forces working against growing in a significant way, mainly the capital commitment involved in becoming a manufacturer and a large scale producer of the product. We're still on that track, but the opportunity came up to lease some additional space in the back of our facility. And we were trying to come up with any reason we could to do that. And what we came up with was there are some areas of the ice business that we don't currently operate in. And one of those is this up and coming desire for high end bars and restaurants and whatnot to offer this crystal clear craft cocktail ice. And you can make it in different forms. So it can come in a 2-inch cube form, spherical form. You can press these cubes into diamond shapes and all sorts of other different things. You can also use them for decorative purposes at weddings and other events. So what happens is you have a block maker and this ice comes out of a block maker as a 300-pound, essentially enormous block of crystal clear ice. And you can freeze things in. And I've seen people freeze bouquets of flowers in the ice blocks and use them to line entrances to weddings. I've seen people just use the blocks to build enormous winter wonderland event spaces. So it doesn't take up a lot of space. This entire facility is probably going to be an additional 1,000 square feet. I'll tilt it over here. There's just a little front section of it. It's still pretty raw, but that was something that we thought of. Hey, it's going to require a fairly minimal capital investment. We already have our hooks in with a lot of the food and beverage community in the city, and we've preliminarily pinged them about would they be interested in receiving or purchasing this type of product for their bar menus. And we got some good feedback. So we're going to make the capital commitment. We're going to start producing this hopefully in the next month or so. And it's an exciting opportunity to go from the SMB M&A space where we're just purchasing an existing business to launching a completely different product line on our own from zero. So it's something we're excited about.
That is super exciting. And it's cool to see as you learn a business, you are able to recognize different opportunities in the space. I don't know that custom ice would have been on my, not even to mention just reselling ice to begin with was a business, but much less custom ice. Is there any difference in the makeup of the ice that makes it unique, or is it just the shape for kind of decorative purposes and high end use, or is there something else that's unique about it that makes the operation more complex?
Wouldn't make it complex. It's going to be highly filtered. So there are 4 or 5 different ways of filtering kind of public utility water or any type of water for that matter that would go into the raw material of this particular product. The most widely used of which is reverse osmosis. So we intend to put in a reverse osmosis filter. We're probably going to use a charcoal filter as well, and potentially even a UV light filter. That way, when you make these blocks, they make them incredibly dense. And the idea is when you put them into a cocktail or whatnot, 30% of the volume of any given cocktail is going to be the ice if it's a cocktail that requires a cube to be in it. And so as you go through the process of consuming it, these types of cubes will melt at a much slower rate than what a normal cube that you would get out of a restaurant's ice machine or your ice machine at home in your refrigerator or your freezer. And then when it melts, the water that becomes incorporated into the drink is going to not have any of its own taste, right? Whether it comes from the minerals that are in the public utility or any other kind of inconsistency that gets in there, it's not going to mix in with the beverage. So high-end cocktail bars really love that idea just because it allows the bartender to really highlight their skill and what they're producing to you, and not have it be degraded in any way by this cube that makes up 30% of the volume of what the product they're putting in front of their customer is. So there's a good market out there for folks who want to see this. It's also a kind of it's a luxury item. So you're not going to see it at these dive bars in South Philadelphia probably, but you're going to see it at the bar, probably at the Four Seasons. You're going to see it at the bar at the Ritz-Carlton and a lot of these other places that pride themselves on their cocktail programs. And bars that have cocktail programs are the ones that are going to want to purchase these types of products. But there's a decent number of them here. So we're looking forward to providing that product.
Maybe after your career in the ice business, it sounds like you've got all the makings for a mixologist coming up after this. It sounds like you've done plenty of research on that. So that might be an exciting
Yeah,
second life for you. Go
that's an
ahead.
interesting point. That's, as my partner and I talk about where this product line could potentially go, there are a couple other examples of folks around the world to do this. Not a ton in the United States that have this extensive company, but there are a bunch of other companies in Dubai and Asia and whatnot who have utilized these types of products as a jumping off point to more lifestyle oriented products, and especially the ready to drink canned or pre-made cocktails. And that's a burgeoning market in the United States that currently fairly dominated by the largest manufacturers of alcoholic beverages, but we think there's space in a more niche form to potentially go down that road as well.
No, that's really exciting. And I'm sure that as you see the longer and longer that you're in the space, you see more and more opportunities that may not be jumping off the page to the average Joe. I'm curious, what were your guys' criteria? You said that the capital requirements were fairly low to try this. Did you take orders from customers prior to even launching this, or was it just a conversation that said, oh, yeah, we would be interested if you had this? And how do you think about, because obviously launching a whole new product line is much more difficult, and we can compare and contrast that in a minute, of versus like buying straight into a business that's already running. How are you thinking about justifying that, and what kind of returns are you going to be demanding internally to show that is successful?
Yeah, the capital investment required up front, even if we didn't have orders to begin with, is perfectly, we're chalking up as an R&D cost, something that we think is, from our conversations with our customers, we think there's a demand for it. There is a local company that creates craft ice that is only spherical. So they have it's not even really that clear. It's somewhat filtered water that's packaged in these little plastic containers that they will give you 6 cubes. They're only spheres. And we had a pretty good relationship with the owners of that business. They were asking us if we wanted to be a distributor for them, given our network within the city. And we told them, give us a second and we're going to go around and ask our customers and see if that's something worthwhile, because it was going to cost us something to hold the inventory on our site, on our premises. So going around and talking to everybody, they liked the idea of the craft ice product, but they didn't understand why they could only receive spheres. They're looking for something that's more of a cube. They're looking for something that has a little bit more of a better presentation, things that they could use, things that they could mark with. There's these special instruments where you can put your logo on the cube if you want, or shape it into other shapes. They weren't as excited about the spherical product, but that was the only thing that this company was offering. Going back out, we asked them again, hey, if we were to do this, would you be interested in the cubes? Would you be interested in seeing some maybe more decorative items, like the large block with some interesting art in it, or something along those lines? And that they got really excited about. And we had probably half a dozen customers tell us that they'd be willing to be the pilot program for us if we were able to produce a product that was to their spec, which is a 2-inch by 2-inch crystal clear cube. That's something that they would like to pilot for us. So was reason enough for us to go ahead and purchase the equipment, lease the space. Obviously, the landlords here are the same that we have for our main facility, which is adjacent to this. And they were kind enough to give us a kind of a 3-month pilot lease, where if we couldn't get things off the ground and didn't think that it was worth a long-term commitment, that we could back out of it if we wanted to. So they were really cooperative with us about it. So all the pieces came together. It's not as much of an upfront capital commitment as we thought it would be, and we're going to go for it.
That's really exciting, and I hope that it works out for you guys. It's awesome to find and see opportunities to expand your market share, offer a different line of products for very low cost. It's a fun little test. And you're
Yeah.
able to, if it does take off, it probably would be very lucrative. One last question on the niche ice cubes here. I'm guessing you mentioned that's a luxury product. I don't know if you can, probably can't give me specific numbers, but uh, talk to me just loosely about the margin profile of just generic ice versus these. I'm guessing it would be much higher, but then I'm not sure. What are the, we could maybe compare and contrast those.
No, it's pretty good. I'm hoping that none of my bar clients are listening to the Scuttlebutt podcast. If you look at if you break down to the individual cube, you're producing it for somewhere along the lines of 8 to 10 cents per cube, and at a wholesale level. So if you're selling it to a bar that's going to then put it in their drink and include that in the cost of the cocktail, you can sell it to them for roughly 50 cents, 40 to 50 cents per cube. And then if you're for the general market, if you were able to sell it, just if we sold it through our own retail space, or if we put it in some local grocery stores and whatnot, I believe that goes up to roughly 75 cents to $1 per cube.
Wow. And you don't really think about it being like, that's obviously a low denomination dollar figure, but everybody needs ice. And it's an easy business to probably take for granted. But if you work in the restaurant industry, that might be whether you live and die or have any guests in a certain night if you can't keep your drinks cold.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's a stylistic thing. People who are, patroning these high-end bars, it's something that they expect, obviously that the drinks are going to be well made, and that if they are going to take 40 minutes to drink an old fashioned, or if they're going to take 40 minutes to drink a Negroni, that it's not going to be diluted in the first 5 minutes with a bunch of nasty city water. And so there's a little bit of utility value in it, and there's a lot of stylistic value in it. And so the people that are going to these bars, they value the quality of the cocktail, but they also value the quality of the style and the aesthetic, and that goes into part of it.
I'd love to rewind the clock here a little bit. You've done a couple podcast interviews, so I'm not going to drag you through rehashing a lot of old stuff, but I'd love to maybe get from a high level an overview of your career, of what gets you from the service through your time at Blackstone to buying an ice company. Maybe just take 2 to 3 minutes and give me the spiel.
Yeah, a lot of it is probably a enormous combination of luck, and not being centered on any one particular goal or vision for where my life was going when I started in college. So when I was in high school, I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened. I already had my commission to the Naval Academy. I wanted to go to the Naval Academy since I was 6 years old. I had two cousins who went there, graduated in 91 and 92. One was the captain of the baseball team. So I went down there all the time to watch him play baseball, watch the Army Navy games, went down for his graduation. And General Norman Schwarzkopf gave the commencement address right after we won Desert Storm. It was just, I've wanted it my entire life. 9/11 happened when I was a senior in high school. Being the firstborn of an Irish Catholic family, my mom was incredibly protective of me, and I was doing anything that I could to make my parents happy. And she said she didn't want me to go to the Naval Academy. She was too afraid about what the war was going to mean. And I was not very happy, but I obliged and ended up going somewhere else instead, with the idea that I would enlist or become an officer after my college time. While I was in college, I met a couple of guys who had already served in the enlisted ranks in the Army and had active service. And then they were in a National Guard unit at the time that was local to Philadelphia. They got me interested in that. They made some good points that kind of struck with me about how I could try to have a career at the same time, about how we were going to be deploying a lot. The PA Guard at that point was the most deployed National Guard unit in the States. And they were on a pretty decent clip of one 1-year deployment every 3 years. They also made the point like, "Hey, if you know us," they went to school with me, they were in college with me. They were in the same unit. They said, it made a good point. If we're gonna go to war, why not go with guys that you trust, guys that are have it together, they're physically fit, they're putting the time in. So they made a good case to me. And so when I was a senior in college, I enlisted in the Army National Guard as a 19 Delta cavalry scout. Later reclassed to 11 kilo indirect fire infantryman to do some a different reconnaissance unit. But yeah, at that point, there were a lot of other things going on in my life. My father had just gone to jail, gone to prison for a number of years, and my family lost everything that we had. And I lost direction of my life and didn't know what I was going to do. The military was a great crutch for me to realign my values and get me on track again with my discipline and what I needed to move forward. And so when I started to reach the latter portion of my enlistment time, after a couple of deployments, one of my former unit commanders had left and he had started this hedge fund with a couple other partners, and he thought that I'd be a good fit for the team. Some of the partners were alumni of my high school, and it was local to Philadelphia, local to where I lived and grew up. And he thought I'd be a good fit. And at that point, I was trying to decide whether I wanted to do that or make a career in the Army, because I actually really love the Army. Love what it gave me in terms of kind of the community. Thought I was pretty good at it. Got a lot of purpose out of it. Got a lot of good vibes. But this was an opportunity to try something different, see if I could prove myself in a totally different capacity. And so I liked the challenge of the unknown. So I ended up going in and working as an intern at first. The gentleman that I knew that recruited me, he was the chief operations officer. He was responsible for all the back office duties and whatnot. And so I interned for him for a few months. He said, "Hey, come intern. If you like it, let's see if we can find a permanent role for you. If you don't, no big deal. Don't withdraw your application to move over to active duty. Just see how it goes." Ended up really liking it. Worked for him for a few months during that time. Some of the other investment analysts left and went to some funds in New York. So they were really short staffed on the investment team. At that point, I told them like, "Hey, why don't you show me a little bit of the work? Let me see if I can pick it up, try to lift some of the weight for you while you recruit and hire some other guys." Did that for a couple months and did a good enough job, taught myself everything that I needed to know, bought Wall Street prep courses and just taught myself the job. And a couple months later, they told me that I could have the permanent role on the investment committee if I wanted to. So took that and followed that line for a few years. We ended up getting purchased by the credit division of Blackstone, which was GSO at the time. Now it's Blackstone Credit. And it was funny. I think I might have discussed this with you, but when I first started working with these guys, it felt like a little bit of a startup. It was 8 of us. It was really work hard, play hard mentality. We'd be tossing the football in the middle of the day, trying to come up with investment ideas. And it was a very casual environment. That was 2011. We had probably $25 million. And then by late 2014, mid 2015, we had over $12 billion under management. And it wasn't the same. Obviously, there was a lot more money being managed. There was a lot more responsibility for the institutional money that we managed, and we had to take it very seriously. But the culture definitely changed. And then when Blackstone got involved, culture changed again. I had my sights set on trying to find something different for a while, trying to get back to those earlier days of the fund where it was a bunch of guys who had known each other, had a lot in common, had a lot of culture in common. It was a really tight knit team, and it evolved away from that. It was tough to see that and then sit there for 16 hours a day staring at a screen and not getting much out of it. So I had a friend who was doing the same thing in New York. He moved home to start running some manufacturing companies for his dad. Didn't have any equity though. Wanted to do it long term for himself. And we met up for beers once a month, talked about it. And eventually the timing was never going to be perfect, but it was good enough. I jumped ship and he kept working for his dad while I was searching full time. And then when we bought the ice business, he jumped ship too. That's how we got here.
That's all it took just to get to buying an ice business. It's a good story. What one of your takeaways from the working at the fund that you now do in business ownership?
Yeah, and it's might sound cheesy, and I know a lot of people hear this from Jocko and others, but I give people responsibility. I think that's the greatest thing that you can do to make sure that people feel as though they're wanted and needed is you give them meaningful responsibility. And I don't mean, hey, it's your responsibility to clean the toilets today. It's your responsibility to go assess what the situation is with our inventory. And I want you to think about it. Think about what our responsibilities are for servicing our customers in the coming week. And you make a plan for ordering the product this week because it's really important. Give them important responsibility. And you can trust and verify. You don't have to do it publicly. You don't have to say, hey, I'm going to verify this before I let you put it in, but you build people up and you make sure that wherever you are on the ladder, you are looking back and grabbing the guy's hand and helping him climb the ladder. And I might have talked about this with Will on the other podcast, but we got a bunch of guys here who are, they have side hustles. They're doing rehabs of people's homes in the area. They're doing handyman stuff. Our general manager has a vending machine business. One of the guys wants to get a certificate to be a peer counselor or a psychiatrist. And I think that's great. It's a small ice business. Not everyone's going to be able to be middle management. We don't have middle managers, but these guys are hardworking, and I'm doing everything that I can to encourage them to look beyond what they're doing right now if they want to. That's another important thing. You learn, like, growing up in the Army and Ivy League schools and Blackstone and whatever, like, everybody wants to be on the top. In blue collar work, or I didn't even like to say blue collar work, but in work that's not white collar and finance and whatnot, not everybody's like that. Some people, they want a nice steady paycheck. They want to know that they're not going to get fired tomorrow. They want to know, hey, if I have an issue at home and we're not super busy, do you mind if I take off? Yeah, I get it. And some people call that service leadership. I think it's a little bit different. It's like to be someone who cares for people. And I think that caring for employees includes demanding a lot from them and giving them the responsibility and the giving them the slack to make mistakes and learn from them and be smarter and wiser on the other side for making them.
That responsibility piece that you just gave reminded me of two past guests that I've had on who both said the same things that are in blue collar. Maybe that's not the best way to describe that line of work, but you're not sitting behind a desk, let's just say. But Nate Lenahan and Rich Jordan, both people who I know that both SMB Twitter folks, both of them said the exact same thing. And I think that when people hear that you demand a lot from your employees, that kind of turns people off. But when you pitch it as, no, this is responsibility, what that does is it instills a sense of pride when an employee is able to say, this is the thing that I do at this company. It not only solidifies their place in the business, but it also allows them to be proud of it when it goes well. And then it also shows them, it's able to put them on the hook when something doesn't go good. And that reinforces a feedback loop about how they can improve and be a better employee, because we all want that kind of gratification or the pat on the head or being able to leave early on a Friday, whatever it is. The incentives don't really matter. They're all different for everybody. But that feedback loop of feeling good in your place of work is incredibly important. And that's what retains people, certainly.
Yeah. And we're obviously not perfect. There's a long way to go. And we only bought this business 2.5, almost 3 years ago. So there's still some lingering things within the culture that we'd like to change that have just been instilled in this business is almost 50 years old. And the sister of the original owners and her son still work here. So there's still this family connection to the original owners. And I still sometimes when I make decisions about things, sometimes I still get the thing from her. When my brothers owned this place, we did it this way. And I'm like, that's great. They don't anymore. I try not, not being dismissive of it, but sometimes it's difficult to look. The business was built. It stayed this way for 50, 45 years until we came around. we're trying to move it forward a little bit. So it's the old adage, what got you here won't get you there. So it's a leadership challenge for me to get them on the same path, going in the same direction. It's not easy, and it's the right thing to do, but that's where you make the big bucks, is trying to get people aligned.
When you were first considering buying the ice business, what was the thing that was most attractive to you about it? I know one of the things, I'm assuming you just called out the duration of the business. If it had been around for 40 something years at the time, that obviously, if you want to look at it in a Lindy way, like it's probably not going to go away tomorrow. Was there anything else about it that looked attractive to you from an ETA perspective?
The margins were great. So we do a little over 3 million in top line. It's averaged anywhere from 3 to 3.3 during our ownership. And the margins were good. So it's roughly 65% gross margin and anywhere from 25 to 35% net margin, depending on how we're classifying some capital and capital expenses and where, where the floating rate on the debt is. The margins were very good. There's a good margin of safety there. And then honestly, once we cleared all those hurdles, it was from a qualitative perspective, the simplicity of the business. So even though my business partner loves manufacturing and he's really trying to get another manufacturing business under his belt, we're not dealing with a complicated manufacturing process. We're not dealing with something like Rich is dealing with plumbing and HVAC, where you've got to really understand the intricacies of those services and products and the number of different products you deal with, the type of certifications and licensings that you deal with. This is really simple. We have one DOT CDL truck right now. When we bought it, we had zero, but we've grown enough to the point where we require one at this point. So the only licensing that we need are the ability to operate in the city of Philadelphia, which you can argue is a pain in the ass in and of itself. And that's the only reason why the space behind me isn't operational right now, or hasn't been. It's because getting anything licensed in this city from a public health perspective, especially, is quite difficult, as simple as this process is probably going to be. But yeah, no, it's the simplicity of the business. And so we're like, okay, this is our first foray into business ownership, first foray into doing something that's not finance related. So it was layup. There were some landmines initially, the way that the prior owner was running the business, the way that he was clearly not, it was deferring maintenance on the assets, the way he was doing things financially was way off. There were certainly some red flags and some potential landmines. And I think we got pretty lucky in avoiding anything that was catastrophic. But when we looked at it, we're like, none of these things are hurdles that we can't overcome. And that was true. And I think the hardest thing, and maybe some other guests would probably agree, the hardest thing post close was just managing the people. Because obviously there was a team that this guy had assembled. And if he hadn't put together his business processes well enough, he really hadn't put together his team well enough. And so I would say out of the 10 people that we absorbed, 4 of them were really solid and worth keeping around. And the others there were some real red flags, like, hey, this guy really shouldn't be here. It's a liability. And there were a few that were just on the fence. We didn't know if they were going to take up the culture that we were trying to implement or not. And they just self-selected out, and that was fine. I think the biggest challenge was one of the guys who was a liability. It was weird. It was presented a really different problem set for me and my business partners. We never dealt with this before, but I think 3 months in, we got a call from our office manager that they thought that he was at work and he was high, and he was a previous abuser of pills and whatnot. I think he was in AA at the time, or had just been out of rehab at some point. And so that presented a really difficult problem set for us, given we didn't witness anything. And this guy was a delivery driver for us. So he was operating the vehicle. How do you get through that? Eventually we did. I think we followed an appropriate protocol but it's something that I never had to think about that before. And I forget, Chenmark put something out a couple of weeks ago about different things that they had come from the same world that I did. And when they started going down the ETA route, they made a list one weekend in one of their newsletters about all the different things and problem sets that they didn't think they were ever going to have to deal with that they had. And I think a bunch of people on Twitter jumped in and added to that list. And yeah, I could sympathize with all of it. But I think that's the that's the good part about this stuff is I love being a problem solver. I think that's embedded in a male DNA. Is like my wife hates it when I try to solve problems, so I love being able to do it at work.
I just want you to listen. I don't need you to solve problems. Blink, blink twice if you've
Yeah,
heard
exactly.
that statement before. That's so funny. And I love those threads that go around on Twitter when there's like lists or horror stories written about SMB because I think we've ebbed and flowed and maybe come full circle on ETA and sentiment about buying a business. And it is very hard. It's not super easy and straightforward. But I think having a clear understanding of some of the potential problems that you could face and then knowing and having an honest conversation with yourself and whoever you're going into business with, is this something that we want to tackle? Ability to tackle and desire to tackle are much different conversations. And you may not find yourself willing to deal with an employee coming to work stoned. Some other people that may not be a big issue. So picking your poison, so to speak, is going to be a bread and butter thing to before joining the SMB world. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
You were mentioning earlier about your partner wanting to get another manufacturing business under your guys' belt. This brings up the idea of a holdco. I know you've got a lot of interest to pursue, and I think it's easy to see the bright, shiny thing and, oh, maybe what could I do with this? I'd love to maybe get your take on what holdcos ought to look like, how you're thinking about approaching additional businesses, either starting or buying, and then maybe just how that aligns with people's personal goals.
Yeah, it's obviously a huge topic of discussion amongst SMB Twitter and whatnot, and it has nothing to do with us for nothing to do for us with how it might juice returns or how you might be able to share shared savings on costs and whatnot. It's really just my partner and I have ADD and we like a lot of different things. I mean, are intellectually curious and we want to see if we can take the life cycle of the process that we applied to the ice company, which we think has been fairly successful, and apply it to other verticals that are interesting to us and which also provide a decent financial return where we're not, risking a ton of our free cash flow. My business partner loves manufacturing. When he was working in the two businesses for his father, he loved it and he liked what went into it for him in terms of managing engineers and there being a physical product at the end of the assembly line. He liked selling a physical product, developing, building, and selling the physical product. I've never done that. I have other interests. I love home and lawn care. I actually really love energy. When I was the hedge fund that I worked at was specific to energy and energy infrastructure. So pipelines, refineries, terminals, propane distribution, all these sort of different things, which was super interesting for me because a lot of energy analysts just get to look at gas and oil pricing every day and think about how much oil is going to be produced in the Eagle Ford Shale this quarter and whatnot. We got to look at so many different types of assets. That was really fun about it. We looked at marine assets, so ships that were taking LNG across the ocean, floating LNG carriers. We're looking at, like I said, propane distribution, refined products, pipelines, terminals. There's so many different things that went into it. And that's what I found interesting about it. And I think energy infrastructure is way more of a capital intensive business than anything that we're willing to take on, even though I would. But yeah, we're in the holdco space because as much as it would be probably perfectly fine for us to sit here with the ice company for 30 or 40 years and grow it and pay down the debt and be decent financially with it. We're just too curious to do that. We want to see if we can take what we did here and refine our process for improving a company and applying it to other industries and seeing if it works. That's the point that we're at with it.
If you had to take away one lesson from the ice business so far and take that to a completely new industry, and it can only be one, like it could be a learning, maybe a
Ooh.
lesson written in blood or something, what would that be?
The lesson? Oh man. Yeah, the most challenging thing for us so far has been managing the people, managing the team. So I would put way more of an early emphasis on getting that part right. So when we started with the ice business, we had a bunch of different goals. Obviously, one of them being like make sure the team is right over some undefined time horizon. I think we didn't understand just how important it was to not so much to have the right people, but to not have the wrong people. I think that it would have been workable with neutral parties. The people who shouldn't have been here, we took way too long to find ways to get them out of there. And it really does work like a cancer. As much as a really solid player lifts up the people around him, even more a poor player brings the others around him down. I think that effect is exponential to the good player. At least that's been my experience here. So I would say that just making that priority one is making sure the team you assemble the appropriate team first. And I'm sure each company is different, just like each person's different. I might take that approach to the next business and find out that my rank choosing of the priorities is wrong. I don't think so. I think people are the most important thing in an organization. So I think I'll definitely weight that much, much higher in the first 100 days or whatever it is, the next place that we go.
You highlighted earlier buying into a family run business. I can see how that would even even more so impact a lot of feelings and emotions running around, and it sounds like even maybe still dealing with today in some regard. But yeah, you need your people bought in, and you need people that want to be there and aren't bringing the general welfare and morale down of the team.
Yeah, 100%. We actually just met with a couple folks the other night one of whom went to UVA, the same college as my business partner, and just they're entering into the ETA space as a duo, this gentleman and one other. Actually, both veterans too. So they asked if we can go grab a drink with them and just talk about the space in general. And we were happy to oblige. And these guys were working at a place where they were put in as GMs of these different franchises that this larger company owned. And they had experienced a couple of similar things where the larger company would buy a franchise that had been run by a same family for 40 years, and the brother and his son and whomever else were going to still work there. And it never works out. It just doesn't, it never has a happy ending. And it's not to say that it can't. I think that it's a pretty strong hurdle to overcome.
For the last part of this conversation, I want to work through some of the reflections that you've had about your life, time in the Army, time running a business. And I don't want to necessarily do them in like a rapid fire context, but we've got a couple to get through here that I think are
Sure.
big, potent questions relevant to a lot of people. So, one of the first ones, the thing that you told me, you said that you are a firstborn, and having your parents' approval really meant a lot to you. And you even referenced that earlier in our conversation with your mom. How has that played out for you in your life, either positively or negatively?
I've been ashamed of that decision for a very long time. That's how that played out. Um, that had a lot of secondary and tertiary effects for me uh, in different ways. It just one of the funny way it works out. My very best friend from when I was in first grade, and I'm still friends with him to this day. He went to the Naval Academy. A bunch of my other friends that I grew up with went to the Naval Academy. Same year that I would have been. All had really outstanding careers. I went and ended up enlisting in the Army, did 2 deployments, got to do no cool guy stuff at all. I had a really mediocre, not notable one way or the other career in the military. And so, really unhappy about that. It's in the past, and that'll probably tie into something that we talk about coming up. But drawing it all the way back to, was that because I allowed that thing lingering in the back of my head to get in the way of what I really wanted to do? And coming forward now and going through a lot of late growing up, so I'm not going to let anything get in the way of what I want to do, whether it's good or bad. I'll learn the lesson. If I have the inclination that I'm not going to be able to live with myself if I don't do it, I'm going to do it. Nothing's going to hold me back.
Was the realization that your friends going off to do that and seeing their kind of success in that route, was that like the point of divergence from when you felt like maybe you needed to release yourself from that? And this is, I'm not just asking to ask, like, this is a little bit of a selfish question because I feel the same burden in some way.
Sure.
And
Yeah, in a way. And I've gone through a full cycle of how to feel about it. And you can even imagine, for a while, I blamed my parents. And I think a lot of people go through that, and you realize that's not the way to feel about it. At the end of the day, you have full responsibility for what you choose to do. And so, yeah, I was resentful about it for a long time. No longer am. You just realize that you have the ultimate impact on the decisions that you make. And I go through and for a long time reflected on the decisions that I made about my service. What could I have done differently? What could I have not done differently? Why did it turn out the way that it did? Why did I end up in this place at this time versus that place at that time? And yeah, where I am now, it's taking the approach of, you're the star in your own movie. That's your own life. And you get to direct it, you get to act in it, you get to do everything. So shape it the way that you want it to be and stop bitching about it.
couldn't have said it better. That kind of leads into the second reflection I had here. Starting a business as a way to reconcile not being happy with the army or getting war experience.
Part of it, yeah, I was definitely unhappy about that. I was definitely unhappy about not my professional experience with the way that my professional life started out post army, but definitely coming to the realization you could do something about that. You don't have to sit in this chair every day and be pissed off at these people. You could just go do it on your own. You can go do whatever you want to do. That was definitely a spark and is the jumping off point to, okay, forget about everything that happened before. It's a false premise. Think about what you can do right now to be who you want to be and do what you want to do and be, and a lot of it is, you'll reflect on this now, a lot of it is your kids. Be the person that you want, be the father you want them to have, and teach them the lessons that you were never taught, that you wanted to have been taught in retrospect. That's part of it. And like I talked to you about on our call prior, as much as I missed out on doing the things that I thought were incredibly epic in what would have been my 20s, if I had executed on my military career the way I wanted to, I have the opportunity to do different things now. I have the opportunity to execute on epic shit now. And so I'm not wasting any time in doing it.
There's a quote that I see tossed around. I'm not sure exactly who it's from, but it was mostly talking about from a parenting aspect, but be the parent that you needed when you were younger. And I think that you can apply that to anything. Be the friend that you want, be the boss that you want, and trying to elevate yourself to a higher level of responsibility and act accordingly rather than get upset and use your bad experience as justification for acting or being a piece of shit.
Yeah, especially here. No one's holding a gun to your head to do anything or be anywhere at any given time. And I think that as much as this is harped on in our circles, maybe it's not harped on enough in enough circles because you see so many lost, wandering young men these days. It's like the solution to this is taking responsibility for yourself. Stop blaming other people. And maybe it's not getting through. I see it everywhere I go, but maybe it's just, maybe it's selection bias because of the things that I choose to listen to and watch and people I choose to be around. Maybe it's just not pervasive enough in these other people's circles.
I think that the what you're describing and the actions required to do that manifests itself in a way of what you call being a controlled savage. What exactly does that mean, and what does that look like?
I think what I was referring to is probably the character that Jordan Peterson puts forth a lot in terms of a strong, a very dangerous man is a weak man because he's the one that's going to stab you in the back. But a strong man is one who is perfectly capable of savagery, knows that they're capable of savagery, and retains that and holds that for appropriate moral purposes. I think that's what I was getting at with moving towards being a strong person. Strong person is perfectly capable of savage violence, and to think otherwise, I think it's just naive. But being able to act and to restrain yourself and save that for the most dire and moral circumstances, I think makes you a strong person.
I was thinking about this concept a couple weeks back and doing some personal reflection on my time in the military. And I think from a young age, when I was considering joining the military, I really was excited, but like most young men who grew up playing Call of Duty and idolizing the war heroes of yesteryear, had very unrealistic expectations about what war actually means and thought that is what it meant to be a man, to be somebody that was just this, it's a war hero, somebody who can just go in and be the savage. And as you're speaking to this, it's resonating with me in a big way. And because the lesson that I have been wrestling with for years and years, even throughout service and even post, has been trying to come to grips with that I have been that person that I wanted to be the whole time, but the actual game was trying to figure out how to restrain that
Mhm.
and tame that beast, which I think almost all young men have buried inside them. They've got somebody who's dangerous and willing to go to wild lengths to harm and either themselves or other people, and that's not who we were meant to be.
Yeah, I think it's a good summary. Yeah, for sure. Now I was thinking about it while you were talking. What I was so upset about during my service was I was there. I was in the Middle East. I was deployed. I was in a combat MOS. I was there. And all I wanted to do was be tested. And I didn't get tested. And I'm like, okay, what else can I do? Like what? I've taken the responsibility. I've gone through the appropriate means to put myself in the situation that I wanted, and I'm not getting out of it what I want to get out of it. I'm not testing, for lack of a better word, my manhood. Like I'm here to try to prove myself as a young man and be tested because this happens once a generation. It's never going to happen again, as far as I know. So that was what was driving me nuts. And then slowly the realization that you can be tested in many ways. You can test yourself many different ways. Of course, it's one way. It's the ultimate way. It's you test yourself in small business. You test yourself taking responsibility every day, approaching the world in a certain way. It's having a certain mindset. You test yourself going to jujitsu. You test yourself. It's all discipline. And it comes back to discipline. You don't feel like going to the gym today to lift weights. Can you overcome that? That's an internal struggle, just the same as not the same, but it's the same along the same spectrum of testing yourself and being tested internally with discipline and combat and preparing for combat and preparing for life. So it's all on the same spectrum. And if you can appreciate that, and it's almost like you talk about an NFL team and they're 5-0, but who do they beat? They beat the person who's in front of them. You go and you confront the things every day that you're confronted with and the situations that you put yourself into, and you do so in a disciplined, moral manner. That's a test. Every day is a test.
I don't know if you're a Meditations by Marcus Aurelius fan. I would guess that you are, but I was reminiscing on that book a couple episodes ago in my 100 episode recap. And man, that entire book is about everything that we're talking about. If you're listening and that's resonating in some way and you haven't read that book, that is a absolutely required reading on self-mastery and being the man that nature requires, I guess, to use his words.
Yeah, something I might have told you about, and definitely talk with Christian Ruff about, another guy, the 160th guy, is one of the things that I've lamented recently since starting a family and whatnot is the loss of the brotherhood and the loss of having the guys around who you support and they support you. And I've done at the beginning of this year, I started looking at the fact that I never really read a lot of the great books, especially the Bible. Like I've read snippets here and there for English class, but never really read the whole thing. I was a Catholic growing up and I never read the Bible because it was interpreted for me by the priest. So I wanted to go through this year and make an exercise of reading the entirety of the Bible. And I wanted to do so with some help. And I noticed that for all the faults you can find in Christianity or any sort of organized religion, I always revered the fact that all my Christian friends had these really great men's groups to go to and to experience together. And they have a great communal infrastructure. And so to help me along the path, I enlisted a couple of my Christian friends, one Catholic, one Methodist, a couple evangelicals, one Baptist. So we meet every Friday and I'll read what I read for the week in the Bible. And then we reflect on that on Friday. And I call it my Bible study, even though I'm not full-fledged Christian anymore. I call it my Bible study. And probably halfway through the year, what I started to do was I started to see patterns in the different layers of the onions of the stories in the Bible with several other great works. And so I asked my friends, hey, do you mind if when we read a story this week from the Bible, whatever the theme for that story might be, if we reflect on that same theme in these other great books? So we started incorporating things from Stoicism, things from literature, poetry, other great works. And so now it's a great works meeting every Friday, but I'm trying to see if it can somehow organically develop into something that resembles the infrastructure and framework of a Christian men's group where we can do retreats together, or we can have a structured reflection of how we're staying disciplined, how we're living our lives appropriately and morally. And it's exciting, but it's been really helpful for me to do that. And I encourage others to as well.
I think once you read any amount of the Bible, you certainly don't need to be religious to read it, but there are so many lessons, as you just highlighted, that far surpass just the religious aspect. It's anything that is that old that is still referenced, whether it be Meditations, the Bible, or any other kind of literature that's still around. A lot of that stuff holds up really well. And a lot of the same issues that men and women were dealing with a couple thousand years ago, we have not changed that much. We've got Zoom and podcasts and things like that now, but still dealing with a lot of the same internal struggles we were back then.
Yeah, no doubt. And these things pop up all the time. And it's really fun. It's really interesting to go through a story and peel back the layers of the meaning, hear what different people interpret it as and what it means to them. And different people have read more historical context than I have to hear about, oh, does this word actually mean this? What was happening from an appropriate context during this story? What were these other people doing in the village up the street that might have had an effect on that? Just people's different knowledge and assets that they bring to the conversation. Just it goes back to it just makes you don't know anything. And the smart person and the wise person understands they don't know anything. You still learn something new every day, and it's really enjoyable.
Absolutely. Is there one thing that you think that we could take away from you? Maybe it's a learning or takeaway from that you pulled away from your men's group, or maybe anything else that we've talked about today or haven't, that would really solidify what we could learn from Brandon Adams.
Oh man, I don't know. I don't take myself that seriously. I don't know.
That's a good answer too.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I don't know. Be more disciplined.
I like it. No, I appreciate the journey that you've been on. And when you first had told me that you had ended up starting this group as a result of spiritual and kind of personal exploration without being religious, I was like, man, that's the pinnacle there. And I think that recognizing strong units and groups, whether or not the religious affiliation is there or not, is like a really astute observation. I think we as individuals need accountability. We need people that we can share ideas with. We need all of that and then some. And there's really no better place to find it than a small group of people.
Yeah, I just wish I had it sooner. Don't waste any time. Yeah, if you're out there, get after it. That's it. Find some people that want to get after it in the same way and get after it together.
Absolutely. Brandon, I really appreciate your time, man. This has been fun learning from you. A lot of really good takeaways and lessons from this conversation. What can myself or anybody listening do to be useful to you?
Oh, first of all, thank you very much. You put out great content. I think you're a great source of cohesion for the veteran community. Just keep doing that. I think that there are a lot of veterans out there that need to know that they're supported. I think there are a lot of men out there that need to know that they're supported. I would encourage anybody to reach out if you're struggling, for sure. But yeah, no, how can you be useful to me? Keep inspiring me with what you're doing. Keep and broadcasting. Don't be shy about it. Keep talking about your wins and losses and be an inspiration to others.
It's amazing how far seeing other people talk about their losses goes. That's super
Oh yeah.
inspiring in a world of being a nonstop barrage of look at my ARR and look at this massive real estate deal that I closed. Like I'm about to I need a filter of just showing on Twitter or online, just, hey, I need some loss porn here. Tell me about some times you really messed up.
Yeah, we didn't touch on it, but I certainly felt that way so many different times the first year of owning this business. And like you talked about, like getting a call at 2 a.m. to go drive out to some Red Lobster that was like an hour and a half away. On the drive out, I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing? It's like literally 6 months ago, I was sitting at a desk, like at a energy hedge fund for Blackstone. And now I'm driving this fucking truck on the turnpike out to a Red Lobster in Reading, Pennsylvania. What am I doing? Yeah.
Doing something really right or really wrong, one of the two.
Yeah, that's probably where a lot of this came from. It's just like too much time on the road listening to podcasts and self-reflection. And now I'm like, I'm either going to go nuts or I'm going to go into monk mode, one of the two.
It's business ownership. Like you said, it's certainly not all that you see online. And I appreciate you being a part of that group of people that is transparent, and you shared a lot of wins and losses, things that aren't super glamorous. And I think that kind of rounds out what being a business owner is all about. So, Brandon, I really appreciate your time
Yeah.
today, man. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, Brock. Thanks, man.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Your listenership helps me better educate people like you and the rest of our nation's military, both past and present, on building a successful life outside of military service. If you're looking for more ways the top vets are leading more effective lifestyles, building businesses, and using the resources designed specifically for you, press here for a selection of some of the best clips. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date, and I will be talking with you soon.